Hey, I'm Peter, and welcome to Waking from the Fire podcast. You're going to love this episode because it's full of so much. We have an author on. Let me start with this. If you grew up in the 80s and 90s in the New York tri-state area, you know about Action Park. Chances are you were there. Chances are you still have scars from that park. Maybe you've seen the documentary. If you haven't read my next guest's book and you lived through that, and even if you didn't, I absolutely recommend it. It's called Action Park, and it's really, I'm going to let Andy talk about that, but it's a unique action park, adventure park, amusement park, whatever you want to call it. It's a park that would not happen today for so many reasons. So, Andy Mulvihill, welcome to the show. I'm so glad you're here to talk about this because as a teenager, was at Action Park many times. And I just want to share this visual with you to give you an idea if you weren't there. I remember running from water slide to alpine slide, from one amusement to the other. And I remember bleeding from my knees into my white tube socks. That's the kind of park it was. So, Andy, welcome to the show.
Hey, Peter, it's great to be here, man. Can't wait to talk about this. It's a lot of fun.
Absolutely. And I want to start with the Cannonball Loop. And let me tee this up. The Cannonball Loop was this imposing structure that, the way I remember, Andy, is we would park across the street, walk across the street, and there it was, kind of just staring me in the face, intimidating me. I want you to explain this because you're the first human being that actually went through this. And the more amazing thing, I think, is, Andy, your father asked you to go through it. Tell us about that Cannonball Loop.
It actually evolved from a ride called the Cannonball. What was interesting about Action Park is it was really one of the first water parks in the country, and so my dad was a bit of pioneer. It wasn't like he could just go to ride manufacturers and say, "I'll take that one," or "I'll take this one," or that one. There were very few guys that made water slides. Now there's dozens of companies that make dozens and dozens of rides. Back then, it's like nobody was. So you had to make a lot of the stuff yourself. And most guys were using concrete and fiberglass. But my dad found a guy named Dick Corral who decided that he wanted to take and use effectively wrestling mat or foam with vinyl over it to make it slick and then put water on it so that you could slide down it. But the beauty of this foam or wrestling type mat about this thick is that you could cover the base, usually concrete, and if you banged your head on it or your knee or your elbow, you'd be fine. Versus hitting concrete or even fiberglass, you could cut yourself. So it was an ingenious idea. The problem was it was a real pain in the butt to maintain because it could rip and you'd have to patch it up. But anyway, we had this ride called the Cannonball, which was they took a steel pipe, like a drainage pipe, that was probably, I don't know, 4 feet high and 4 feet wide, circular, and they took sections and they just put them together and created a tube. And the Cannonball that we had, the first one, you would get in the tube, which was inside was rubber mat, and it was pitch black, and you'd go down it, and it would make a turn, and this particular one shot you through the air into a pool of water that was about 15 feet below you. It was like, and the water was in a shady spot, so it was ice cold. So it was an unbelievable, wonderful experience. People loved the ride. And then my father, he couldn't be satisfied with that. So he said, why don't we take the tube and rather than just running it down, let's run it down and let's loop it around like a loop to loop. Everyone wants to do a loop to loop. You've seen that, like the motorcycle guys, skateboarders have tried to do it. The loop to loop is the ultimate, right? And my crazy father wanted to do it with a water slide. So we did it with this Cannonball loop tube. And he was working on all winter with this guy, Dick Corral. And actually, I always thought my father came up with the idea on a napkin, but I heard from Dick Corral's wife through another person that she said he figured it out. So let's give it to Dick Corral. But anyway, they built that thing in the winter when I was in school, and it was ready to go, like right in the spring, early summer, and it hadn't been tested. And my father says, "Hey, I want you to come up. I want you to go on this new thing I got." And he didn't tell me like anything. Thank God I had my hockey equipment in the back of my car. I was a hockey player in high school. So anyway, he shows me this thing. It was set up in the parking lot. there was, I don't know how they got me up to the top of it. It was like alongside of a hill or something. And the bottom of it, there was no pool. It was just like a mat with some, gravel. And so anyway, I go up to the top of this thing and I look down at it. I'm like, really? And he's like, yeah, it'll be fine. And so I go down this thing, and man, it was scary, and it really screwed me up in terms of turning me discombobulating you, because you go zooming down. It's really steep. And then when you get to the bottom and you go up, it's like your stomach gets ripped out of you. And then you go up in the air, and you have to hopefully stay on the top of the slide. If you don't, you can fall down to the bottom of it. I stayed on the top, I think. I couldn't even tell. But anyway, I got out alive. And so we figured, my son can do it. Let's put it up at the park. So we did, and it didn't go so well.
Yeah. In the book, you share some stories, something about teeth.
Yeah, well, I don't know if that story's true. That's the whole thing about Action Park. There's so many stories, and it's hard to decipher what was true or not true. I wasn't there during the tooth episode. Apparently, somebody knocked their teeth out and they got stuck in the mat, and the next guy that went, cut his arm on the tooth stuck in the mat. Sounds pretty crazy, but the bottom line was, the thing that would go wrong with it is when you would go through the tube and you're doing the 360 and you're the top of the loop. If you don't have enough momentum to stay on the top, you'd fall. You fall to the bottom of the tube, but that fall could smack your face and could give you like a bloody nose, broken nose, or I guess even knock your teeth out. And
Right.
so we figured we could control it with weight, but even if you controlled for weight, because of body mass and the way people are built and the way they move around, they go through at different speeds. We never perfected it. We couldn't get it to work so that every time someone went through what could go through safe. We tried for a number of years, but my father built the ride right at the entrance. So everybody that came in looked at
It
this thing
worked.
and they're like, did I make a mistake buying a
Yep.
ticket to come into this place?
That
When
happened to
did he
me.
open? I want to go on that. The crazies would
Yeah.
say.
As an
Yeah.
18-year-old, Andy, your what your father's vision was happened to me. I would walk up and say, "Oh, I don't know, man. Do I have the guts to do that, the balls to do that?" If we were with girls, then you couldn't back out. And that's part of Action Park's uniqueness and why I said a park like this just couldn't happen today between lawsuits and litigation. But let's back up. Let's talk about your father, Gene Mulvihill. Did he have any experience as an amusement park owner? Was he an engineer? Like, what made him think he could do? He really just created this park out of his imagination, it seems.
Yeah, he was a fearless entrepreneur. He had a lot of confidence. He was a big risk taker in certain ways, and he was just wouldn't take no for an answer. And he loved people. He was a bit of a rascal, and my grandfather, his father was a rascal, and they just liked being active. He played every sport. My father introduced us to everything. My God, at my house that I grew up in, we had a soccer field, a baseball field, a tennis court, a pond for hockey, a gym. We did everything. And so he's a super active guy, and he bought the ski area. Actually, he lent some guys some money, ended up with a ski area, and he said, what am I going to do with it the other 6 months, 7 months of the year, 8 months of the year? And he says, well, I got to try to do something to entertain people. And so he put in he put in bumper boats, a skateboard park, and an alpine slide. And then he said, well, this looks pretty good. Let me put a few more things in and a few more. And before we knew it, we were doing like 15,000 people a day, and we had an amusement park. So it kind of grew on itself, and it was just frankly one of many ventures that he had. I mean, at the same time we were doing that, we were doing some real estate development in the area. But my father was into cancer research drugs. He was into cellular telephone. He had a huge brokerage business in the stock business. I mean, he was in the houseboat. He had a million businesses.
Yeah.
Super entrepreneur, fearless, and just loved entertaining people and wanted to see people have fun. And that's what drove him. He needed to make money so he could build the stuff. And sometimes he just was making money in other businesses to put into Action Park because it wasn't making anything. But he didn't care because he wanted to entertain people. It was not about the money; it was about having fun, and
Yeah.
it was great. It was great being his son. It was great working there.
Yeah. So I want to talk about a couple of things there, but your dad was, he was a maverick. He was unique. Reading your book, by the way, I loved it because it was action park. So you're hearing these crazy stories. We're going to talk about the water slide that ripped bathing suits off in a few minutes, but I'm reading about it. And as an entrepreneur, I'm getting inspired because the guy had balls. At one point, I think there was, or maybe there would never was insurance at the park, liability insurance. He was that kind of a guy that said, let's do it. Let's figure it out. Let's give people the control. That's the message I got in the book. Like, let's give people the control to have as much fun or as little fun or hold themselves back or challenge themselves as much as they want. So, as an entrepreneur, the book inspired me. And I also love, if you know me, I also love the backstory, the story that you don't hear, the family man that he was, the six of you growing up with him and your mother, being a close family unit. So talk a little bit about that, Andy. How was it growing up with a dad like this who's putting you down a cannonball loop, the first human being, and then going to church on Sundays? What was that like?
Well, he came from a there were actually two kids in his family, but his parents, his father had like there were like 8 or 9 of them. A big Irish family. Family was really important. Going to church was really important. My father went to Lehigh, and when he got out of college, he went into the Marines. So he served as a Marine, which we all knew very well because he used to make us all march. There were 6 of us, and whenever guests would come over, he'd tell us to line up and march and the guests would get a kick out of it, and we'd be embarrassed, but he would chuckle. But he was a real disciplinarian in terms of you didn't mess around with him, you did what he said, but he had very few rules. I mean, he had his rules. I think he had like 4 rules: don't drink and drive, don't ski out of bounds, and don't ride a motorcycle on the road. You can ride it in the woods, but don't ride on the road. Those are like the only rules that
Yeah.
he had, and we all survived. But no, he was a lot of fun. He was, he wasn't my friend. He was my father. But
Mhm.
my God, the stuff that we did with him, the places he took us, the adventures, and he was one of those guys. I hate to equivocate him just a little bit to Donald Trump. When listen to Donald Trump, and you're like, he's so full of crap. He's so full of it. That's not true. And then after a while, you find out that it's actually true. My father was like that. He would like tell us something and be like, "No way," and he
Mhm.
didn't. It ended up being true. So,
Yeah.
and he was often Peter. He was often the smartest guy in the room. He was a very very bright guy,
Yeah.
uh, but he was a good guy with a big heart, risk taker, believed in personal responsibility. Didn't think it was a problem at all for people to go on rides and get a little beat up. Did he ever want anybody to get hurt bad or die? No. Did that happen? Yes, it did. But if you go to Disney World or you go to the Jersey Shore, unfortunately, people when they're really active, stuff happens, and there's deaths in those places. It doesn't forgive what happened with us, but it kind of explains it a little bit.
Of course. So let's talk about the I forget which ride it was where eventually someone started noticing, like, there's a lot of people losing their bathing suits at the bottom. And then the story goes, well, then your dad built stands so that people could watch. And I heard you're interviewed on NPR, talking about this. So did your dad really do that? Did he build a stand to watch
So
people?
the same guy that did the Cannonball Loop had this ride which we called Surf Hill. Imagine a giant wrestling mat like 100 yards wide and like 400 yards long, coming down a hill with humps between lanes. So there were 10 lanes, and you'd get on a mat, and there was water that ran down it, and you would all start at the same time. And you'd race to get down to the bottom. And the way you were stopped at the bottom is you'd hit a pool of water. And if you held your mat up, you just skim across and come to a slow stop. But if you kind of your mat was down and you're leaning forward, the water would just hit your whole body. And in some cases, it would loosen your clothing, and in some cases, just take it right off. And it was indiscriminate. I mean, it took young people's, old people's, everyone's stuff off. And yes, my father did build a grandstand there, but that was not unusual. Action Park wasn't just about going on the ride. It was about people seeing you go on the ride and actually showing off a little bit, which is kind of like skiing. You know, guys that like to ski under the lift or do tricks or be hot dogs. You know, it's a lot about entertainment, and so much of Action Park was about it. So it wasn't that unusual for him to have something like that. But the thing that was interesting you bring up NPR, I guess in the book I talk about it, an NPR interview, they're like, so your father had young girls losing their bathing suits on a ride, and his solution was to put up grandstands. It kind of caught me off guard, but I'm like, yeah, that's what happened. But it was everyone lost their bathing suit, not just young kids.
Right.
So
You could take that out of context and judge it, or you could just say, hey, the guy liked to have fun and he liked to have other people see other people having fun. That's how it sounds to me.
yeah, the one thing that would often be, and it's probably not nice of me, but I was a young guy and I had bad judgment back then. But
Mm.
some people would lose their bathing suit and have no idea that they're naked. They would just be oblivious, and they just get up and, like, wipe their eyes and start to walk, and people be going, ew, or the girl's friend or the guy be like, pull your pants up, man.
Right.
So it was funny. But the great thing is when we had it back, we had sold it in '95 and we got it back. I never forget a lifeguard when we had it back the second time. Her girl went off the Tarzan swing. She lost her top, and this kid like runs down there with a towel and like gives it to her to cover up. And I'm like, you know what? That kid's got it right. I think I learned something. I was an adult by then, but I would have been better served to probably have acted that way when I was a young man.
Yeah, I'm sure you're being hard on yourself. I think you were a decent person at that point. So you started in the park besides helping your father test rides, and I know in the book you talk about literally digging ditches with your brothers and sisters, your sister.
Yeah. So
Started as a lifeguard at the park.
he my you know my there was no like, look, I played tennis and I played all the sports and I had fun. I played golf, but I didn't go hang out at the country club in the summer. We got jobs, and uh he made us he had 10 acres of land. We all cut the grass. We didn't bring any third party service in. It was all us that would cut the grass and do the boy, I hated the weeding. But my first job outside of working at home was we would drive up there, me and my older brothers, and I was like 13 or 14, and I'd dig ditches and rake rocks and help build the rides in the very, very beginning. And that really, I didn't like that. That was hard work, and I was exhausted at the end of the day and dirty. But we did that, and but then things got easier. I got to work at the skateboard park when it was done. That was interesting. But the move I made, the good move I made, is when Motor World opened up, and Motor World, I picked Water World, working with my sister, and so I was up in the cool water with the girls in the bikinis and the people jumping in the water having fun, while my brothers were sweating it out down as grease monkeys in Motor World. So I think I got the better of that. That's for sure.
It
But no,
it
I worked
sounds it.
14 till I was a year out of college, a year after college, so like 23 or something.
Right. And in the book you write about the wave pool. I think it was the first of its kind, at least in the United States, or there wasn't anything quite like it. And you write about the challenge of being the head lifeguard and then working with a lot of your buddies who were lifeguards about making sure people, didn't drown and understood what the heck was going on and trying to save them when there was thousands of people in this pool.
Yeah, I did not have tremendous expertise as a lifeguard. I was kind of like just thrust in charge of the place, and I had to rely on some really diligent, wonderful young people that were some were a little older than me, some a little younger. Guys like Tommy Smith and Nancy Hollum and Glenn Smokovich, Chuck Kilby. These guys were all guys that I selected that were lifeguards that were great leaders, some really great swimmers and diligent, and really cared and did a great job. And it was not easy. I mean, we first opened the wave pool that first weekend. A kid works at a summer job at a pool, and he maybe makes two saves for the summer. The first weekend, we pulled 100 people out over like 3 days. And at the end of the weekend, like half the crew wanted to quit. They were shell shocked. But then what's interesting is it almost became, I mean, we kind of figured it out how to do it. We put on more lifeguards, we had better systems. Um, and it became like a badge of honor to work at the wave pool. And we had some pretty diligent, tough guys that were some great swimmers and great lifeguards. And we would actually we had a competition where we invited guys from the Jersey Shore up, and our guy won the whole lifeguard competition, if I can recall, a guy named Doug Rounds.
Yeah.
Um,
I
so
love these.
yeah, it was something. That wave pool was it was nasty. I mean, it would
Yeah.
pull people under.
Yeah, yeah, I remember it as a teen, strong, young, and still getting knocked over by those waves and like what the hell just happened, trying to find my right way up. But you the reason I love this book is because it's reminiscent for me. And if someone hasn't been to Action Park, they'll get it. As a teenager, you take chances, you set up ramps, you jump your BMX bike over cans or your buddies, or you do crazy things with skateboards. The thing that I loved was the nostalgia of this, the 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 stories of excitement, but then the behind the scenes. Like you guys used to collect money, have this. Tell us about that real quick. This big party, because I think the reason why we love memoirs, I think one is I want to know the nitty gritty, the behind the scenes, the things that weren't so pretty. You guys would have a big end of year staff party. What was that like?
So what would happen at the park is people would have money in their bathing suits, and because they were so active, it would fall out. And if a guy lost a wad of bills and the guard was right there and the guy's right there, he'd grab it and hand it to him. But a lot of times the money just fell out, no one knew it, and it would be at the bottom of the pools. And so the lifeguards would pretty quickly figure this out. At the end of their shifts, end of the day or early the next morning, they go diving and they pick up thousands of dollars. And so what we established was that you put the money in a fund in the pot, and at the end of the year we'd have a party. You're supposed to put all of it, and then there was like half of it. Probably only 20% ended up in the pot, but there was enough money to have an incredible kick-ass party. And I can't believe my father allowed it, and because there were a lot of very young people drinking a lot of alcohol, and could actually stay over, let people stay over
Yeah.
so that they wouldn't drink and drive.
Right. And
Uh,
you write about some hiding spots and underneath and
oh
behind
my
and
God,
stuff going on in there.
I was in charge, so I was pretty sober, and I just kind of patrolled around, and there was a lot of shenanigans that went on, and um, it was actually more harrowing for me than fun. But the other thing we used to do is we used to take all the guy lifeguards from the wave pool, and we're at a ski mountain, and on the top of the mountain are the lakes that feed the snowmaking system, and it's pretty rural. I mean, it's pretty wilderness up there. So we would take a couple army trucks that the ski area had, and we would go up there after work, and we'd camp out and drink and go swimming across the lake with a buddy system, so no one drowned. We were in pretty good shape with lifeguards, even with the drinking. But we had some wild parties up there too. So, oh my God, we had so much fun. The Fest House tent, where my father recreated the Oktoberfest at Action Park, and it
Mm,
wasn't just for Germans. We had an Italian fest, a Spanish fest, Puerto Rican fest. We had every
it's awesome.
Polish festival, and they were like fun. And we'd work all day, and the festivals went on at night. We'd go down there, and all the guys I worked with, we partied with, they all were my friends. And if you ask them all to this day, I would say 95% of them would say that was the best job they ever had.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And the way your father just did things, he just jumped into it. I know I read in the book about the Oktoberfest, bringing tents over from Germany, bringing brewers over, like making it authentic and bands. Like that's what I think made it so special too. And now still, so I want to ask you a final question. I want to follow up with it with another question. Why did you write this book?
Well, everybody that went to Action Park has a story. If you lived it, me and my family, we had hundreds of stories. And when I heard that Johnny Knoxville was making a movie based upon Action Park, I said, "What? Why are you waiting to record these stories? You got to do it. You got to write them up." And so I went out and I found a writer because I figured really early on if I wanted to. It wasn't about me writing the book; it was about telling the stories. And I didn't really want to write it from my perspective. I wanted to write it really about my dad because he was the genius behind it. I was just like a participant, kind of observing. But the editors, and we were lucky that we got Penguin Random House to publish it. The editor, Sam Rand, was a great guy. he said, "Look, we want to tell it from your perspective." And he actually made me cut out some stuff where I was a little hard on myself. And I had a great writer, Jake Rosen. He's very great, dry sense of humor, good wit. By the I wrote all the stories down. I wrote all the themes. We agreed on an outline. I told him what was important to cover, and he just started writing. And I would review it, and then he'd send it back and forth. And by like the sixth chapter, he had my whole. I'm like, my God, Jake, this is dead on. How'd you know? He's like, I've got it figured out. We did interviews. We interviewed like 100 people to just get other people's perspectives from what it was like then, and which was great because these guys are all my friends, and it was a great experience for everyone. So it's like not as if people were reluctant to interview with us, but the one thing I have to mention is the thing I love about the whole Knoxville. So Knoxville, I hear, is writing a book. I mean, making a movie, and I'm like, I got to talk to this guy. I can't believe he hasn't called. And a friend of mine's a Hollywood actor, and I call him up. I said, "Can you find how to get a hold of Knoxville?" He says, "Oh my God, our kids go to school together. I'll talk to them tomorrow." Like within 2 days, I had Knoxville on the phone, and it wasn't a question of whether I could get him on the phone. I couldn't get him off the phone because he was like, "I've studied this place." He says, "Let me ask you this: did he really build a big swimming area in the side of a mountain? You could just jump off cliffs anywhere on top of people?" I'm like, "Yeah, Johnny." He's like, "Come on, really?" Johnny Knoxville just loved the whole idea of Action Park because it was really, what was whatever his show was called. I forget the name of
Jackass.
this. Jackass. It was like,
Jackass.
this was before Jackass. Action Park, like, was Jackass. And so Johnny
I think it
Knoxville,
inspired him.
and
It
you know
had
what
to.
was really cool is he was on Jimmy Kimmel. I saw him interviewed and talking about his movie, which unfortunately didn't go well. He invited me to the premiere, and I got to hang out with him one night, which was really a lot of fun. But anyway, he's on Kimmel, and Kimmel says, "So this Action Park movie that you made was based on a real Action Park. And this guy, Gene Mulvihill, he must have been a sick, bad guy." And Knoxville goes, "No, no, no. He was a genius. Gene was a genius."
Yeah.
So that was really cool. Knoxville was a great
And he
guy.
and he
Enjoyed it.
was, Andy, I got that out of the book. I have to say, besides the nostalgia of Action Park and living through it, hearing the backstories, it's a memoir, really is how I saw it. So it's part memoir, it's your words, and they're humble words. Here you are, and I know your father was sometime in the past by, I forget the group of people that they're referred to in the book that were in that Vernon area. They were,
The
against your father for
crazies, the
certain things.
crazies. He called them the crazies.
The crazies, right? They were against him. Who is this guy? But the book, what really came across, Andy, your voice of, hey, my dad was a good guy. He loved his family. He just loved adventure. He loved freedom. He loved giving people that excitement and that freedom. So I
Yeah,
got that out of it. I also got the inspiration. Like, if I want to do something, I'm not going to hold myself back. Gene, and now you and your family, you seem like you live this ethos as well. Like, just do it, man. And I think your dad would be proud. I wish I had met him, but I think he'd be proud at you and some of your siblings and what you've done with that area and the development that you're in now. I would just see it as a continuation of what he started, taking risks and building things for people to come and have life experiences. So I would say well done to that as a legacy to your dad.
yeah. I was fortunate that I had, he was alive until 2012, and so I had a lot of. I worked with him a lot. I turned towards real estate development, and we built a lot of wonderful things. The Minerals Hotel, the ski lodge at Mountain Creek, the Ballyowen Golf Course, Wild Turkey, Black Bear, a number of golf courses, and then the Grand Cascades Hotel. And I built a couple thousand houses, residential developments, and a lot of it with him. And we had a lot of fun together. But you're right. What he taught me is don't do something ordinary. Don't just don't check the box, blow the box up. Try to find, when you look at a project, do something that's going to inspire people, that's going to make people say, wow. That when they're like, when I built the Grand Cascades Hotel, I wanted them to round the corner and see an amenity and say, wow, that's great. And then they go to the next one and like, there's another thing that's awesome. And then another thing. I mean, we have indoor pools with water slides at a hotel, aquariums. I have a garden a beautiful vegetable garden where you can dine in there. The chef's garden, they do outdoor cooking. We have fire pits out on the deck where we have live entertainment at night. Doing something that's inspirational that people can really enjoy. To me, it's the ultimate achievement. You got to make some money along the way, or else you can't do more of it. And
Right.
it's nice to do that, but it's really about it's the journey that's special, and that's what he taught me. Do
Yeah.
something. Don't just do something that's okay. Do something great.
Yeah, and I think you've all done that. So well done. And if you, the viewer, listener, haven't been to uh, Grand Cascades Lodge and Minerals and Crystal Springs Resort in general, it is a unique, immersive experience. It's beautiful. It's one of a kind, and it's in New Jersey, an hour from New York, which is really awesome too. Andy Mulvihill, your book, Action Park, I recommend it for so many reasons that I shared in this podcast. Thanks so much for sharing the story with us.
All right, man, and look for it. We're talking to MGM about making a movie. So look for it coming out on one of the streaming services or in the theaters.
I would love that. Keep us updated about that.
All right, you got it.
Take care.
All right, bye bye.